The city never slept. Its lights shimmered against the night like 1,000 restless stars, reflecting off wet asphalt from the earlier rain. Emily Dawson stepped out of her car, adjusting the strap of her clutch as she walked toward the grand entrance of the Crystal Harbor Hotel. Tonight was meant to be the pinnacle of her career, a gala she had meticulously planned for months, a showcase of her talent, precision, and dedication. Every centerpiece, every floral arrangement, every guest seating was a reflection of her tireless commitment. Emily had learned early that perfection was not just a goal. It was her shield. Her mother, a former event planner herself, had drilled into her the mantra, "Excellence is quiet. It speaks for itself." And Emily had lived by it. Her team adored her for it, clients trusted her implicitly, and colleagues often compared her attention to detail to an art form. She paused at the hotel lobby's grand marble staircase, inhaling the scent of polished wood mingled with fresh blooms. The string quartet was already playing, a soft, elegant prelude that made the air feel sacred. Emily's eyes scanned the room. Tables were flawless, place cards aligned like soldiers, every napkin folded with mathematical precision. A minor imperfection in a gala of this scale could ruin not just the event, but her reputation. She could not afford mistakes. "Emily, the last table is set and catering is confirming the timing," said her assistant Nina, holding a tablet. Her tone was calm, professional, yet tinged with excitement. Emily allowed herself a small, controlled smile. "Thank you, Nina. I couldn't do this without you." Nina shrugged, the faintest smile tugging at her lips. "You make chaos look effortless." Emily's laugh was soft, almost drowned by the swell of arriving guests. She touched the small earpiece nestled under her dark hair, listening to her coordinators confirm every minor adjustment. Everything had to run seamlessly tonight, because one misstep wasn't just a professional failure. It was a personal betrayal of her own standards. The doors opened and the crowd began to stream in. Women in flowing gowns floated across the floor, while men in tailored suits discussed business or politics. Emily moved among them like a shadow, invisible yet omnipresent, guiding servers, adjusting linens, catching a misaligned flower stem before anyone could notice. This was her gift, the ability to orchestrate perfection while remaining unnoticed. And then he entered, Adrian Blackwood. The name alone carried weight. At 38, he was already a titan in real estate, his empire stretching across coasts and continents. Rumors of his wealth and influence were whispered in the corridors of power. His presence demanded attention without demanding it. Tonight he wore a navy suit that seemed to have been sculpted just for him. His silver-gray eyes scanned the room, catching subtle details that others missed. A crooked tie, a chair slightly out of place. Emily noticed him, but she did not stop. She could not. Every instinct told her that perfection had no pause button, even for someone like Adrian Blackwood. She was in her element, until chaos arrived in the form of Marcus, a young server carrying a tray of champagne glasses. A misstep. A stumble. Emily's instincts fired. She lunged, trying to catch the tray, her hands brushing the falling crystal. But it was too late. Glass shattered. Champagne flew like fireworks, spraying across the room, and Adrian Blackwood was directly in its path. Time froze. The soft string quartet screeched to a halt. Conversations died mid-laugh. Guests stepped back, phones emerging, recording the disaster. Emily's breath caught. She had done everything to prevent this moment, and yet here it was, manifest in red liquid, glittering like a cruel mockery across the front of Adrian's suit. She rushed forward, trembling, offering napkins. Do not." His voice cut through the silence, low, precise, unforgiving. Emily froze, her hands suspended in midair. The world felt like it had narrowed to the distance between them. His eyes were unreadable, a storm behind silver-gray irises. I can clean this." "We have emergency supplies," she stammered. "Step away." The words were not just a command. They were a verdict. The humiliation was immediate, visceral, suffocating. Emily felt every gaze in the room bore into her, recording every second of failure. She knelt, gathering glass shards, her hands shaking, her heart pounding. Her carefully constructed world, built on precision, pride, and relentless discipline, had crumbled in a single crimson moment. Her manager, Robert, appeared, his face tight with concern. Emily, step back. Let me handle this. It's my responsibility, Emily whispered almost to herself. But responsibility had its limits. By the time the gala resumed, Emily felt invisible in the worst way. She had been seen, not as the orchestrator of perfection, but as the cause of chaos. Later in Robert's office, reality struck harder than the spilled champagne. Emily, I have to suspend you pending a full review, he said. The words landed like a hammer. 6 years of flawless events, meticulous planning, dedication, and sacrifice, all suddenly rendered meaningless. Walking home through the cold city streets, Emily felt the weight of her failure pressing down on her. Every laughing couple, every cheerful gathering of friends was a reminder that her world had fractured. In her small apartment, alone, she sat in the bath until the water turned cold, scrubbing at the stains that mirrored the shame in her heart. She had dedicated her life to creating perfect moments for others. Tonight she had become the moment everyone would remember, for all the wrong reasons. Yet as she lay in bed, exhausted and broken, a faint spark stirred inside her. This was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning. Because even in the deepest despair, the universe has a way of offering unexpected paths, and sometimes, a single encounter can turn tragedy into the first step toward an extraordinary new life. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the blinds, painting thin golden stripes across Emily's bedroom. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring blankly at the floor, the events of the previous night replaying in her mind like a relentless loop. Each glance at the coffee table reminded her of the unpaid bills, the looming rent, the precarious position of her career. Harbor Rose Hotel had been her life for 6 years. Every gala, every wedding, every meticulously crafted moment had defined her. And now it felt as though the world had ripped that identity from her hands. Yet amid the numbness, a quiet resolve stirred. She could not allow this singular moment, one misstep, one accident, to define her. Not entirely. Emily spent the next days in a fog, carefully avoiding emails, calls, and texts from colleagues. Nina had tried reaching her, leaving messages of encouragement, but Emily had not responded. The suspension from Harbor Rose felt like both punishment and mercy. It gave her space to breathe, but also reminded her of everything she had lost. She wandered the city aimlessly, each street familiar yet alien. Cafes she had passed hundreds of times now felt strange, the chatter of patrons a distant echo, a world in which she no longer belonged. She felt untethered, as if the ground beneath her feet had been pulled away, leaving only air and uncertainty. It was on the 5th day that the unexpected happened. While walking through a quiet art gallery, seeking solace in the muted colors and the stillness of painted landscapes, she heard a voice behind her. You have a talent for seeing what others miss. She turned to find a man in a tailored suit, tall, composed, with those unmistakable silver-gray eyes. Adrian Blackwood, her breath caught. She had expected anger, indifference, perhaps even mockery. But his gaze was calm, measured, almost curious. You're Emily Dawson, he continued, a hint of recognition in his tone, though there was no accusation, no bitterness. Her instinct was to shrink, to avoid him, to pretend this meeting was a coincidence that had gone wrong. But there was something different this time, something softer, less rigid. I don't think we've met outside the gala, she said, her voice betraying the slightest tremor. Technically, we haven't, he replied, but I remember the incident. I also remember how quickly you tried to prevent it. Most people freeze. You acted. That takes courage, even if it didn't go perfectly. His words, measured and precise, felt like a lifeline thrown into the churning storm of her guilt. Emily blinked, unsure if she should respond or flee. I ruined everything, she whispered. No, he said firmly, stepping closer. You didn't ruin anything. You tried to protect others, and that's something few people even attempt. The rest is perception. His presence was commanding yet unexpectedly gentle. It was as if he carried both power and patience in equal measure, a rare combination that demanded attention without demanding fear. Emily found herself listening, truly listening, for the first time since the gala. His words did not erase her embarrassment, but they gave it perspective. Perhaps failure was not a full stop. Perhaps it was a comma. Adrian, sensing her hesitation, added, I believe people are more resilient than they think. The trick is to recognize opportunity within adversity. You have that resilience, Emily, I see it. She was silent for a long moment, processing. No one had ever seen her like this. Past the surface perfection, past the flawless events, into the quiet determination that had defined her life for so long. He seemed to recognize her not just as a professional, but as a person, flawed yet determined, broken yet capable of rising. In the days that followed, Adrian reached out repeatedly, offering mentorship, advice, and even discreet assistance. He suggested she take time to reimagine her career, to consider avenues she had never explored. He spoke of leadership, strategy, and vision, urging her to see the potential in her talents beyond the confines of strict event coordination. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt a spark of possibility ignite. She began sketching ideas, drafting proposals, and imagining herself not just executing perfection, but creating it on her own terms. Yet it was not without struggle. Every night doubts returned, whispering cruel reminders of that gala. What if she failed again? What if her reputation could never recover? Emily fought these thoughts with methodical determination, refusing to surrender to despair. She revisited every lesson she had learned: preparation, composure, and the quiet power of excellence. And slowly the narrative began to shift. No longer was she merely a woman who had failed. She was a woman poised to reclaim her life, to define her own success rather than live in the shadows of expectation. One afternoon, Adrian invited her to Blackwood Enterprises, a sprawling glass tower overlooking the city. He walked her through offices and meeting rooms, introducing her to individuals who were leaders in design, planning, and management. The world she had once only observed from behind a service desk was suddenly tangible, accessible, and invigorating. For the first time, Emily saw her skills not as limited to flawless execution, but as transferable, strategic, and valuable on a scale she had never imagined. "Emily," Adrian said, pausing at the top of the building, "greatness often comes from the edge of failure. You've been given a chance to see the horizon beyond your mistakes. Take it. The world doesn't forgive mistakes. It rewards courage, vision, and persistence." And with that, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. She would not dwell on the spilled champagne or the humiliation. Instead, she would rise from it stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. For the first time in days, she felt a glimmer of hope, the kind that burns quietly before exploding into opportunity. Weeks passed, and Emily's life began to take shape in ways she had never anticipated. Working alongside Adrian, she discovered a side of herself that had long been suppressed. Beyond meticulous planning and perfection, she had vision, intuition, and creativity that could inspire entire teams, transform projects, and create experiences that left lasting impressions. Under his guidance, she began developing a boutique event consultancy, focused not just on execution but on transformation, turning ordinary gatherings into unforgettable experiences. Adrian was an exacting mentor. He demanded excellence, yes, but he also nurtured potential. He pushed Emily to take calculated risks, to trust her instincts, and to embrace imperfections as part of the journey. In moments when self-doubt threatened to overwhelm her, he would remind her of the resilience she had displayed even at her lowest point. Emily learned to view failure not as a reflection of her worth, but as a stepping stone toward mastery. The relationship between them grew layered, evolving beyond professional boundaries. Late evenings in his office discussing strategy slowly gave way to conversations about life, aspirations, and unspoken fears. Adrian shared stories of his own struggles, moments where failure had threatened to define him, and how he had transformed those trials into triumphs. Emily, in turn, began to open up about her own past, the relentless drive for perfection, the sacrifices, and the moments of quiet despair. The bond that formed was not sudden or superficial. It was rooted in mutual respect, understanding, and the shared recognition of strength forged in adversity. One evening, after a particularly grueling project presentation, Emily stood on the terrace overlooking the city lights. The skyline sparkled, a mosaic of ambition, dreams, and possibility. Adrian joined her silently, offering a quiet presence rather than words. For the first time in months, Emily allowed herself to feel pride, not just in her accomplishments, but in her survival, her resilience, and her courage to begin anew. "Emily," Adrian finally said, his voice soft yet commanding, "the world is full of those who give up after one fall. But you rise. You learn. You adapt. That is rare, and that is powerful. Her heart responded not just to his words, but to the truth behind them. She realized that her identity was not bound to one night, one mistake, or one career. She was more than her failures. She was vision, talent, and courage incarnate. And with each day, each decision, she reclaimed a piece of herself that had been buried beneath shame and doubt. By the end of this period, Emily had secured her first independent client, a high-profile charity event that had previously been handled by a large corporate team. She poured her heart into planning, ensuring that every detail reflected not just elegance but meaning, connection, and inspiration. When the night of the event arrived, Emily moved through the space not as a shadow behind perfection but as a conductor, orchestrating an experience. And for the first time, she felt seen, not as a woman who had once failed publicly, but as a leader, a visionary, and a force to be reckoned with. Her journey was far from complete. Challenges remained, doubts would return, and the world would continue to test her limits. But Emily Dawson had discovered something invaluable: the power to transform pain into purpose, humiliation into resilience, and failure into opportunity. And standing beside Adrian, she understood that sometimes life's harshest lessons were merely the prelude to the most extraordinary chapters. Emily Dawson had learned that success was rarely linear. Even as her boutique consultancy began to earn acclaim, each day brought a new challenge, a new test of resilience. There were clients who doubted her because of her past, colleagues who whispered behind closed doors, and moments when she caught herself wondering if she truly belonged in a world of power and influence. Yet each obstacle became a stepping stone rather than a barrier. She had survived public humiliation and professional suspension. She could survive anything. The turning point came during a large-scale gala for a philanthropic organization that had been hesitant to hire her, citing her relative inexperience in comparison to established firms. Emily had accepted the challenge, seeing it as both an opportunity and a test of her capacity to rise above her past. The preparation was grueling. Every element, from lighting to menu, from floral arrangements to guest flow, required her full attention. Adrian was at her side, offering strategic guidance and quiet encouragement. But Emily insisted on leading the initiative herself, proving to the world and to herself that she could succeed on her own terms. On the night of the gala, Emily felt a familiar pulse of anxiety, but it was tempered by a newfound confidence. The grand ballroom of the city's historic Mariners Hall was transformed under her meticulous planning. Guests arrived to a spectacle that was both elegant and intimate, a seamless blend of luxury and warmth. Emily moved among them, guiding servers, adjusting lighting, and subtly enhancing the flow of conversation, all without drawing overt attention to herself. Yet this time, unlike the fateful night at Harbor Rose, she felt in control. Every decision, every adjustment was a conscious act of leadership, not reaction. Halfway through the evening, she noticed a familiar figure approaching from across the room. Julian Blackwood, the man whose cold dismissal had once shattered her confidence, had arrived unexpectedly. Emily's initial instinct was to retreat, to shrink into the shadows as she had once done, but she held her ground. She had changed. The shame that had once consumed her was no longer a chain. It had become fuel. Julian's eyes scanned the room, and when they landed on her, there was no smirk, no cold assessment, only recognition. Recognition of a woman transformed. "Emily," he said quietly as he approached, his tone carrying a mix of surprise and respect. "I've been hearing remarkable things about you." She straightened, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. I've learned that failure is only the beginning, not the end." The simplicity of her words struck a chord with him. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and turned back to the guests, leaving Emily with a quiet sense of triumph that no applause could fully articulate. She had reclaimed her narrative not through luck, but through persistence, skill, and unwavering resolve. As the night drew to a close, Emily reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a single devastating mistake that had threatened to define her life, she had built a new career, a new sense of self, and an understanding that personal worth was not measured by one's failures but by the courage to rise above them. It was a lesson she would carry with her forever. The ability to transform adversity into opportunity, humiliation into empowerment, and doubt into determination. And through it all, Adrian remained a steadfast presence, not a crutch, but a mirror reflecting her potential, a mentor who had believed in her when she could not believe in herself, and gradually a companion whose presence began to feel indispensable. Their connection had grown, rooted in mutual respect, admiration, and the shared understanding of what it meant to rise from the shadows into one's own light. The following months marked a new chapter in Emily's life. Her consultancy had flourished, attracting clients who sought more than perfect execution. They sought experiences that resonated emotionally, that left lasting impressions, that told stories. Emily had become known not just for her meticulous planning, but for her vision, her creativity, and her ability to transform any event into a narrative of beauty and meaning. Amid the professional success, her relationship with Adrian deepened. Late nights discussing projects gradually gave way to evenings sharing personal stories, quiet moments on city terraces, and the comfort of knowing that each had seen the other at their most vulnerable. Adrian's admiration for her talent and strength was matched by a profound respect for her integrity and empathy. For Emily, his presence represented not power or influence alone, but partnership and trust, a foundation upon which something beautiful could grow. Their first real acknowledgement of their feelings came during a winter gala, ironically hosted at the very venue where Emily had once faced her greatest humiliation. The irony was not lost on them. Amid twinkling lights and laughter, Adrian took her hand as they stepped onto the balcony overlooking the city skyline. "Emily," he said softly, "you've shown me what it truly means to rise. Not just from failure, but into the person you were always meant to be. I see you. Not just the professional, but the woman who never stopped believing in herself." Emily's heart swelled, a mixture of gratitude, relief, and love. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted, her voice steady, filled with emotion. "You reminded me that failure is not final, that courage is forged in the fire of adversity, and that sometimes the right person sees the potential in us before we see it ourselves." Adrian smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We saw it in each other," he said simply. The weight of the past lifted, replaced by the quiet certainty of partnership, trust, and shared ambition. Emily's journey, which had begun in humiliation and despair, had transformed into a story of empowerment, resilience, and love. She had turned tragedy into triumph, fear into opportunity, and doubt into unwavering self-belief. Her career thrived, her personal life blossomed, and the lessons of her past became the pillars of her future. She understood that life would continue to test her, but she no longer feared the fall. She had learned to rise, to adapt, and to embrace the unknown with courage and grace. In the quiet moments when the city skyline glimmered beneath them, Emily reflected on how far she had come. The spilled champagne, the whispered criticisms, the cold dismissal of a once unreachable man, all of it had been necessary to bring her to this moment. And now, standing beside Adrian, she finally understood that some nights break us so that brighter days can follow, that some failures teach lessons only pain can impart, and that love, opportunity, and success often arrive disguised as struggle. Emily Dawson had risen, and she would never look back.